I'm in the mood. I'm feeling rude. I'm feeling hot. I want to run. The feeling exciting. So darling, let's do something. I wanna rub my body on your body. Let me rub my body on your body. I wanna rub my body on your body. I wanna rub and love up. I wanna rub and kiss up. I wanna rub and jam up. I wanna rub and rub up. I wanna rub my body on your body. Rub my body on your body. Let me rub my body. I just get paid. I want to play. The vibes is right. I wanna hug up tight. No time to waste. I wanna work my ways. So come on up, babes. Give me a taste. I wanna rub my body on your body. I wanna rub my body on your body. Let me rub my body on your body. I wanna rub my body on your body. I wanna rub and love up. I wanna rub and kiss up. I wanna rub and jam up. I wanna rub and rub up. I wanna rub my body on your body. I wanna rub my body on your body. Let me rub my body on your body. I wanna rub my body on your body. Well, no. I'm feeling, 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 I'm feeling. Smoking my brain, I wanna do my thing. Work up a sweat until I soak in wet. Rub your body, show no mercy, because I'm feeling tipsy, I'm feeling freaky. I wanna rub my body on your body. I wanna rub my body on your body. Let me rub my body on your body. I wanna rub my body on your body.
If you are looking to have your statutory declaration, affidavit of income, identity, damage or lost passport, lost license, tenancy agreement, agreement of settlement, power of attorney, last will and testament, and certification of documents, then you need to visit the Alistair Collins firm, located at the Killian Mall, 162 Lamaha Street in Georgetown, between Camp and Waterloo Street. Alistair Collins is a commissioner of oaths and a justice of the peace. Make certain you visit him or call for more information at 649-6410 or 685-6448 or 503-1451. And there's adequate parking available. Go down to the Alistair Collins firm and have all of your legal issues settled and brought to the fore. Alistair Collins Firm. Contact them at Alistair Collins Firm.
That little ditty we used to torment our teachers with when we were kids goes something like this. Onward, upward, Mary had a go. Day by day she tied it to a rope, till at length they got a busty rope, and Miss Mary had to run behind it. We had a lot of fun with that, but do you actually know how beautiful these words are? Here's the Song of Guyana's Children by W. Hawley Bryant. Born in the land of the mighty Roraima, land of great rivers and far-stretching sea, so like the mountains, the sea, and the river, great, wide, and deep in our lives would we be. Onward, upward, may we ever go. Day by day in strength and beauty grow, till at length we each of us may show what Guyana's sons and daughters can be. In the land of Kaiture's shining splendor, land of the palm tree, the croton and fir.
All right. Hey, guess what? Good evening. My name is Mark Benschop, and we are going to rock and roll for 1 hour. 1 hour we're going to be on here for on 107.1 FM. You see that what is on the, I guess our operator put that up. Well, I'm glad that our operator actually put that up so that you folks can remember this song. The Song of Guyana's Children, right? I don't have a singing voice, and so you wouldn't hear me singing it at all. But it goes something like this. Whilst we prepare for our show, we prepare for Enrico Woolford, who actually, for the first time, I have an announcement to make. When Mr. Woolford comes on, I will be making that announcement that may probably surprise a lot of you guys. But let's, before we get to that announcement, with Enrico Woolford, I have a couple of questions for him as well. We give you guys an opportunity to wake up your neighbors, wake up your relatives, and so forth. I know it's Friday evening, but we are going to rock and roll with all of you. And good evening to you folks who are listening to us via the radio, 107.1 FM. Every single one of you, including those mentally retarded folks at Freedom House. We got to say good evening to them, because regardless of how we twist it, how we turn it, regardless of what we want to say, they are still Guyanese. those folks at Freedom House are still Guyanese. And let me repeat, those mentally retarded folks at Freedom House are still Guyanese, if you know what I mean. And the mentally retarded individual who happens to be or is disguised as the vice president of Guyana, they watch this program too. They are tuned into us. And nothing is wrong with us saying good evening to them as well. You know what I mean? Good evening to all, every single one of them. We, unlike those mentally retarded folks, we do not discriminate against anyone. Absolutely no one. We do not do that. That is not our style to discriminate against anybody. I know you guys are eagerly awaiting to see my face. Of course, you all want to see my face, don't you? You will get to see my face shortly, right? Don't get all, but remember I said that I have an important announcement to make. May shock a lot of you guys, but I will await until our guest this evening, Mr. Enrico Woolford, veteran not trade unionist, veteran broadcaster. I have something I'm going to announce. I want to surprise you guys this evening, right? But let us get back to this. Look at this. The Song of Guyana's Children. If you know it, sing it out loud whilst we prepare for our guest this evening. Our guest, Mr. Enrico Woolford. I have an announcement to make. You guys are going to be surprised. You guys are going to be happy about this announcement. I want to ask Mr. Enrico Woolford tons of questions this evening. I kind of caught him off guard at the last minute. Our executive producer got in touch with him, and I got the call back that right away, Mr. Enrico Woolford said yes, he would do absolutely anything to be on the show that is called Straight Up on 107.1 FM. And now he is in studio with us. But before we get to Mr. Enrico Woolford, veteran broadcaster, you guys know him. You can't miss Enrico. But let's get back to this song. It goes like this. And I'm going to put on Hi Lorraine Garnett. No Hindi night tonight. Absolutely not. Nahi. Right? Kerry Woolford. Hey, I guess you heard the news too, right? We're all happy. We're all happy, Kerry Woolford. So here's this song. Born in the land of the mighty Roraima, land of great onward, upward, may we have. How many? Look, I put this specific this song up here because how many of you guys actually know the words, right? Look, seriously, look, the words are right there. Some of you have been singing wrong stuff over the years. It's born in the land of the mighty Roraima, land of great rivers and far-stretching sea. How many of you guys know the actual words? All right, good. Now that we got that out of the way, let us clear the way for Enrico Woolford, no stranger. Absolutely no stranger to you guys. Now you get to see my face. Good evening to all, every single one of you. And I'm sorry that I'm pronouncing the all like that presidential candidate who said all. That's how she pronounces that word, all. And I've got to be careful tonight with my pronunciation because Enrico Woolford is a veteran broadcaster. He's been on the block since God in heaven knows where. He's a graduate of Syracuse University. And those guys don't make any joke at all. All right, let's get ready to rock and roll. Good evening to all of you. That's how we hype it up here on 107.1 FM, right? We hype it up. It's an energy. We are full of energy, right, Lemon? All of you. It's 13 minutes after 9 o'clock in beautiful Georgetown, Guyana, where there is no blackout at the moment. Absolutely none. We're not expecting any, but hey, guess what? They got some things I wanted to talk about before Enrico comes on. I'll put that aside. I'll leave the AFC for now. But let's get to Enrico Woolford. No stranger to all of you. Good evening to you, sir.
Good evening, Mark. How are you doing?
It's really good to see you. I promised the people that I'm going to make an announcement right here on 107.1 FM. I am not going to make that announcement yet. I will wait until they share the link and do all sorts of things because I want the world to hear what I have to say before we get into what we need to get into. But off the bat, how have you been, sir?
I've been all right so far, just hanging in here, trying to see how best I can continue to contribute to the development of this country, hopefully, and keep people on their keep things on an even key. I have not been as active as I want to be, but I'm here.
And it's really good to see you. Really good to see you. I see on your bookshelf there you have that book on Caste.
Yes. It's a rather interesting book, and I think it is important for people in Guyana to know that that book exists.
It does exist. And why you think it is important for people to know that it exists?
Because it helps to describe what has happened in the world and what has happened in Guyana. We don't even realize that it has happened in Guyana. Because our tendency now is just to look at things from a materialistic point of view, how much I can get, what I can do to get what I want, without regard to the overriding complexities as to why we are here, how we got here, and how the systems in the society have caused us to be what we can be. Earlier this week, a colleague, virtually a family member, a neighbor of mine, passed away in Canada, and I was at the family. Very good guy. He was a senior air traffic control officer at the Chedi Jagan International Airport, Robert Singh. So I was with his family that I consider to be my family, and we got talking about things in Guyana. And one of the interesting things one of the family members pointed out is that everybody tries to pigeonhole people, classify you, categorize you, make you into what you really are not necessarily. And that has hindered the development of the society. So I think a book like Caste points to the fact that people stratify and classify and sectionalize societies. And as a result of that, we have run into various issues over time. Even as I was pointing out to somebody, there's a bank going up in South Georgetown where I live. And believe it or not, Mark, it's the first bank that will be in South Georgetown. The first major bank. There's one further down at Thirst Park, but that's a very small branch. But the fact that we have not had banks in the southern part of the city tells you something about how people think of the city. And as I was giving a guy a ride home who had been working with us, and the first thing that came to his mind, the reason we didn't have banks in this part of the city is because somebody will rob them. The funny thing is, he went to one of the premier schools in this country, and the people who robbed the bank in Water Street, Georgetown,
were from that same school.
And it had nothing to do with location, and it had nothing to do with what you think of people. But that's one of the challenges that we've had over the years.
Yeah, well said about that. It has been a challenge indeed. I've noticed somebody congratulating you on writing that book, Cast. But let me just let them know that it's a woman by the name of Wickerson, right?
Yes, yes.
And that book is basically talking about how America got to where it is today as it pertains to racial discrimination and all these things that they have to fight. It's a good book. People should pick up a copy of that. Enrico Woolford is actually not the author of that book, even if he was the author.
No, I'm not. And I wouldn't claim to be either.
Yeah, Wickerson. So they should pick up a copy. Lots of folks should pick up a copy. It'll give you guys an idea as to racial discrimination and so forth in the United States of America that is applicable in other parts of the world. Enrico, this big thing now, COVID-19, it is horrible all over the world. In fact, I have a family member who is tested, but that person is recovering. And it's really, really sad. But I want to get to, before I ask you this question, let me wish this guy, this gentleman, I saw it on Facebook earlier, Mervyn Williams. He is currently in the COVID ICU. That is the COVID hospital in Lilliandale there. Let me wish Mr. Mervyn Williams a speedy recovery, and all other persons who are going through what they're going through right now as a result of this virus. What is your take on how this COVID-19 virus is being treated in Guyana?
We've had serious challenges with the COVID-19 virus, and that's not unexpected in a developing country where people are accustomed to behaving in a certain way. And we have a culture in the society where we believe in meeting and greeting and getting out there. One of the challenges we also have is we like to talk a story. We like to be anecdotal rather than scientific. So first we have to understand the science, and then we have to work with the science. I also wish Mervyn Williams a speedy recovery. We've had colleagues who have who've had difficulty with dealing with COVID-19. We've lost some colleagues as a result, but some have recovered. I remember judging for the PAHO and the Caribbean Broadcasting Union some stories, and one of those stories was on Niaz Suban, who is now the deputy CEO of NCN, who they haven't paid me my gratuity under Article 149B yet, but that does not stop me from pointing out that Niaz was able to overcome the difficulties of being hospitalized with COVID-19. And it is important that we follow the science, we vaccinate as much as possible, and we try to reach herd immunity. We try to follow the science. There are various anecdotal stories, there are various anecdotal pieces that have been going around, and we've got to ensure that we don't fall for hearsay. We don't fall for issues that have not been scientifically tested. I myself got myself vaccinated with a Moderna vaccine, both doses. My son also got vaccinated. And it is very, very important to do that. There are issues with persons who believe that, there should not be mandatory vaccinations. But as Prime Minister Mia Mottley said, those things should not divide a country. Those things should work themselves out in such a way that the country can be united. So if it means we've got to change strategy, Mark, to ensure that people understand and follow the science, follow the public health procedures and the medical procedures, sure. But it has to be by education. It has to be by persuasion. It cannot be by other means.
I got you. I got you. Especially listen to the professionals because the usual gossiping and the talking and the buy this thing in good. Or I got you. I got you. But just you said that you have been vaccinated. You got the Moderna. I myself got the Moderna. Family members got the Moderna. My son got Pfizer. I've noticed a comment from your daughter. Just in case you forgot that you have a daughter by the name of Kerry Woolford. She wants to remind you that she also has been vaccinated. She wants me
Wonderful.
to remind you. Yeah,
I am very happy Kerry, my daughter, got vaccinated, but Kerry loves to tell her own story.
Of course.
And
yeah.
she's my daughter, so she tells her own story.
Yeah. Good evening to you, Kerry. Thanks for tuning in. Good evening to all of you who are tuned in as well. Let's get down to some other business. Earlier, I did say that I want to make an announcement. And this public announcement I'll make now, Enrico and I didn't want to reveal it. But I saw an earlier article, and I'll touch on that article about a court case. Today, I believe it was a court case, a ruling. Before I get to that ruling, let me just for public knowledge that I want folks to know that Enrico Woolford and I are actually related. Hey, cousin, how are you? You have got a judgment in your favor for $150 million. Who wouldn't want to be related to you, Enrico? Who wouldn't?
Well, there are two things that need to be cleared up,
Sure.
Mark, in that regard. One is that I did my DNA test in Ancestry.com,
True.
and I happen to know to whom I'm related, at least scientifically, so far. And of course, that is an issue of probability, but all the probabilities that they've thrown up from Ancestry.com are indeed correct for the cousins that I have, for the brothers and nieces and nephews and so on. But that aside, I just wanted to clear up something else.
Sure.
You would notice there was a statement that was done on my behalf by attorney UC Anderson, who is representing me in this case. The issue is that the attorney and through the court went against Dr. Ramsamy for libel, because Dr. Ramsamy felt that he could just say that these two journalists, Enrico Woolford and Gordon Mosley, will join, has joined the issue here. That these two journalists were involved in some way in some alleged misconduct and irregularity going back to the election period from March 2nd to August 2nd. I took umbrage at that, and I thought it brought down my image, my credibility, my esteem in the society, and we needed to take him to task for it. What the court ruled, what the court ordered today, was that the defense since no defense was filed by the first defendant, Dr. Leslie Ramsamy, judgment in default of defense is entered against Dr. Ramsamy, and damages will be assessed. So it's not necessarily that there is $150 million there, but that's what we sued him for. But damages are to be assessed. We have to go to the court again with statements from various persons to come up with an assessment of those damages in another 2 or so months, 2 or 3 months. And that hearing, that date will be fixed by the court. Dr. Ramsamy has to be served again. Dr. Ramsamy avoided service for quite a while. And the good thing is that the courts have moved into doing default judgments. And this is a default judgment in this case for Dr. Ramsamy, against Dr. Ramsamy. And there will be an assessment by the court with regard to how much that default will be. You'd recall that there was another case where I think Member of Parliament Annette Ferguson got a default judgment against another politician. And that was for $20 million.
And we just want to let folks know, Enrico, that
higher,
the default judgment simply means that there was no defense. Absolutely
there
nothing.
was no defense, yes.
Yeah.
There was no defense.
Yeah. And so you are correct. Annette Ferguson, Member of Parliament, was awarded $20 million. But let's forget about her $20 million. You got $150 million in terms of default. How important was it for you to file this case against Leslie Ramsamy?
To me, it was very, very important because it pointed to the issue of credibility in terms of journalism in this country, Mark. And as a result of that, it tries to denigrate, demean, bring down journalists in this society for absolutely no reason other than you think that you should pigeonhole them. You think that they should follow what you are saying. No, journalism, the way I learned it, and you said I went to Syracuse, the way I learned journalism was that you needed to be objective, you needed to be balanced, you needed to seek after the truth, to ensure that the story is fair, the story is correct, the story tells the real story. Not just conjecture, not just anecdote, not just, well, I heard this, and this is not a fish market. Journalism is not a fish market where you just say anything, you cuss people out, and you just carry on the way you want to carry on. It's not that at all. It has to be based on truth. And what happened in this case is ridiculous, if I can say it that way, where an opinion writer, somebody uses the mainstream media to just call a couple names, say what he likes, and then doesn't turn up. You know?
I guess his excuse is going to be like the other fella, that they weren't properly served. That's going to be their excuse.
Look, I'm glad Guyana's courts have moved toward ensuring that we have proper procedures, that we follow certain guidelines, that we do things in the right way. Because for too long, this society has been haphazard, and people felt that they have a legitimate right to be wrong. And it must also be a legitimate right to do right, not to do wrong. And we've got to move to that aspect of development and growth in our society.
We should be able to do that. I'm glad that you've reminded our listeners, and maybe some of them who may fall into that category. I'm glad I've moved away from that journalism is not a fish market. It sounds to me that you're showing some sort of shades at Fox News, but that's okay. Moving on now. Let us, on a lighter note, I want to take this opportunity to congratulate both the new governor of New York State, first female, and she has become the governor by default, meaning she was the lieutenant governor. Andrew Cuomo resigned and she took the place. Reminds me of David Patterson when he was the lieutenant governor, and the governor then resigned and he became the first Black person, the first African American to sit in that position. And now here it is that we have the second, or probably the second African American person to be the lieutenant governor of the state of New York. And there's a reason why I put him up there. His mother is from Guyana. He visited Guyana before. His relatives are from the West Bank of Demerara. His name is Brian Benjamin, Lieutenant Governor Brian Benjamin. He was on this show not so long ago. He was running for state controller of New York. He didn't get through with that position. But here it is that he is now the lieutenant governor of the state of New York. Your take on that, Mr. Enrico, and how proud we should be as Guyanese that one of our own is now the lieutenant governor.
I am very, very proud of Mr. Benjamin. I'm very happy that he has reached the position of lieutenant governor, and he'll be able to deal with some of the challenges that New York State has faced over the years, particularly from the point of view of incarceration, particularly from the point of view of injustice. I know he has paid a lot of attention to injustice within the justice system of New York State, how people have been incarcerated on Rikers Island, issues with innocence, issues with just locking people up because you have the ability or the authority to so do. So I'm very happy for him as somebody of Guyanese heritage, and I'm extremely pleased that a Syracuse University graduate, the lieutenant governor that is now the governor, Ms. Hochul, has selected someone with Guyanese heritage to ensure that they can work as a team. And so for me, there are two good things: a Syracuse University governor and a Guyanese heritage lieutenant governor. So
you know, when I got you
on up.
I got you, Syracuse grad.
I might point out to you that the president of the United States also got his JD from Syracuse University. I think the university ought to pay me for plugging them.
Let me say that the vice president of the United States of America stopped by at John Jay College of Criminal Justice. She stopped by. She didn't attend. So, yeah, and we're happy. And so you are correct. When Lieutenant Governor Benjamin was on my show a few months ago, he did point out to us in terms of his interest of the the criminal justice system. He's very passionate about that. And again, congratulations to Mr. Benjamin, Lieutenant Governor. But he also, we are grabbing on. We're holding on to him as a Guyanese because his mother is from Guyana and she taught him to cook up rice and all these things. He spoke about that on the show right here on Straight Up. But his father,
also Jamaican heritage, huh?
Yep. I was his father.
Mm-hmm.
But we're not going to mention that. He says he's full of Guyanese. But
we ought to be fair. Yeah, I'm a journalist. We ought to be fair.
Yeah, and I was going to say, yes, that his dad is from Jamaica. But we own him. Just like Shirley Chisholm, right? Her mom, I believe, from Guyana, and her dad from Barbados.
Yes.
Just like Rihanna. One of her folks from Guyana, the other one from Barbados.
Just like Obadeli Thompson, the Olympian.
Yep. Just like And just like a couple other singers too that I know about. But congratulations to the Lieutenant Governor. Hope to have him on this show sometime soon. I know he's very busy. But let's move on. Yes, we are proud. Lieutenant Governor Brian Benjamin. We are proud of you, sir. Congratulations to you. Let us move to another thing that I want to talk about. At a rally in Brooklyn, New York, United States Congressman Hakeem Jeffries has actually called for the removal of U.S. Ambassador to Guyana, Miss Sarah Ann Lynch. Today at a press conference, opposition leader of Guyana, Mr. Joseph Harmon, has echoed the same sentiment. In fact, he said that he is following in the exact path of Congressman Hakeem Jeffries in calling for the removal of U.S. Ambassador to Guyana, Sarah Ann Lynch. I know that you have covered state, you have interviewed a heck of a lot of ambassadors and chargé d'affaires and everybody. What is your take on this call for the removal of Ambassador Sarah Ann Lynch?
Politicians will continue to make calls that are in the interest of their constituents and in the interest of what they think is the national interest of their society, whichever side of the Atlantic that society may fall. However, one also has to look at the realities of a situation where you have career diplomats, and those career diplomats sometimes have to do things, have to say things, have to act in ways that only diplomats can. You know, there's a famous saying about what makes a diplomat. A good man selected, in this case, probably a good person selected to go abroad to do something for their country. And I don't want to use that word, but many times it depends on the direction of the political directorate at the time and what they want. And diplomats, unfortunately, have to do some things that only diplomats can do. There are diplomats too who have overstepped their boundary, who have believed that because they represent a particular head of state, they have carte blanche to do whatever they like, and that is why you've had leaders who have said that they need to mind their own farmyards.
All right. You said that they are diplomats, and of course, a heck of a lot of diplomats who have overstepped their boundaries, not necessarily in Guyana alone, but throughout the world. In fact, in Afghanistan, we're hearing, maybe not in Afghanistan, but a diplomat has actually said some stuff that are not complimentary or not in keeping in what he should be saying. He's taking a lot of flacking for that. But do you feel that there is evidence, we're trying to get your opinion, that the U.S. ambassador to Guyana has somewhat overstepped her boundary?
You wouldn't get that opinion coming from me because I don't want to give my opinion on that particular issue. I prefer not to give an opinion on that. As a journalist, the issue here is that, yes, there have been diplomats around the world who have taken on more than they're commissioned to do. Than they're credentialed to do, and it is for the persons who are involved in the governance and the political stakeholders to call that out when they need to call that out. And if that has happened, the political stakeholders who are involved will call it out. And some of them have called out what they think has been an overstepping of boundaries with diplomats in Guyana. I remember I had an interview with one particular diplomat, and from how the diplomat was behaving, I got that impression. And I asked that diplomat that question more than once. In fact, I think I overstated the question. But I asked the question more than once whether one should not allow the process to take its course. This particular diplomat felt that people were doing things that was not part of the process. And as fate would have it, we saw exactly the same thing in the United States a couple weeks later, and in fact in Samoa. We saw a process that took, as far as I'm concerned, forever, for the first woman prime minister to be sworn in that island state. So many times we pick battles and we pick wars that we believe we can win. But I also want to point out that in Vietnam, where the United States had been involved in a very antagonistic and a difficult and belligerent war, they were able to reconstruct and rebuild the relationship. Much of the credit goes to the diplomatic community. In fact, one of the ambassadors to Vietnam, Ted Osius, I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly, has written a book about that and how Nothing is Impossible is the name of his book, as far as I recall. And he's pointed out that the U.S. was able to reconcile and make sure that Vietnam was the type of country that at first they felt that they were fighting against and being very antagonistic and belligerent against. And just last week, the vice president, was it not this week, the vice president of the United States paid a state visit to Vietnam. So we've got societies that we could learn from, where we can reconcile. And within our society, within Ghana, we need to reconcile. I think we have got serious issues of race, ethnicity, politics, and who thinks that they are the best persons to ensure that a country grows and develops.
All right, that book, Nothing is Impossible, by Tom Oliver.
I'm not sure it's by I think it's by Ted Osius.
Ted Osius, former diplomat, but there's also one, Nothing is Impossible, by Tom Oliver. I thought maybe that was the one along similar lines.
You probably borrowed the name.
Let me ask you this here. Years ago, you interviewed then consular head of the consular section, Vincent Principe. And the reason why I'm asking you this, because it was right off the heels of the Thomas Carroll scandal, visa scandal. Well, what is your take in terms, because he was very vocal. You could tell, I recall that interview with you and him. He was very upset about that fraud, that massive fraud at the U.S. Embassy and so forth. What do you recollect of that interview and trying to repair a sort of damage that was done to Guyanese? I'm not saying that there is a lot of damages done here with this current ambassador, because if you look at the comments of a lot of folks, especially coalition supporters, they seem to be so angry. And getting back to your interview with Vincent Principe, diplomat Principe at the U.S. Embassy there in Georgetown, Guyana, how much effort was done by him to repair that damage then that Carol Thomas did to the U.S. Embassy and to Guyanese?
One of the challenges of getting older, Lord Saywar used to say, is as you get older, the mind edits, and you don't often remember all the things that you have done. Thank you for reminding me of that interview with Vincent Principe. As we were just talking about, diplomats really are, they're like policemen, they're like farmers, they're like hospital workers and what. All people come from the society from which they have been nurtured and how they've been taught. And some people believe that they can get away with doing wrong. They can get away with doing things that are not in keeping with the laws of the society. The reason we have societies, the reason we've structured societies, is because we as human beings believe, and I've got the book behind me called Sapiens. We are Sapiens. We as human beings believe that there must be rules in place, or else people will do whatever they want. It will become the law of the jungle, so to speak. And the important thing about the law of the jungle is that somebody's the hunter and somebody's the hunted. And both people have to run. One has to run to make sure that they are not eaten, and the other one has to run to make sure that they got something to eat. So it is a matter of survival. But in a rules-based society, you can put systems in place that people who are less fortunate, people who have been treated badly, can have some access. That is why we have a constitution, and I have it somewhere behind here. We have a constitution, and most societies have a constitution, the supreme law of the land. So getting back to Principe's interview, what he wanted to ensure is that people understand that the U.S. was a rules-based society. David Cassavetes did a book.
David Cassavetes, the
yes.
Thomas Carroll Affairs.
Yes, the Tom Carroll Affair, and again, I have it here somewhere, in which David said that, in which he recalls, this is his book here, in which he recalls what happened. It is written and it has some defects, I think. It could have been a lot more comprehensive. But it gives an idea of why Guyanese and why this American kid, Thomas Carroll, believed that he can get away with it. And here's our challenge. Our challenge is what Professor Ali Mazrui has said. We have short memories of hate. Some of the same persons who were involved back then in the Tom Carroll affair, who were involved in procedures that were not necessarily correct, have found themselves and have reinvented themselves as major businessmen, as society leaders, and they speak out on things in cultured tones. They become important, and they've become important, and we forgive them. But in a rules-based society, should we just forgive and forget without regard to the fact that there must be some kind of rehabilitation? There must be some kind of reconciliation in the society. So it amuses me sometimes when I hear some people speak. I say to myself, sometimes they think that people have forgotten. Perhaps some people have forgotten. Unfortunately, sometimes even the embassies have forgotten, or they pretend to forget. And
pretend they just don't. Pretend they just don't know, and maybe the chief security officer did not brief properly.
That is not to say, Mark, that people should not be rehabilitated and do well. But don't pomposette and pontificate.
A lot of them are doing that, including some of them who are in the Black Clothes Police. Anyways,
don't pomposette and pontificate when you know that you're not without sin.
exactly, precisely. Hey, Enrico, let me just, before we move on, I wrote not so long ago to the State Department on the issue of Ambassador Sarah Lynch for a comment. They said, thanks for your email. The standard thing, I can provide the following response, background for attribution to State Department spokesman. All ambassadors serve at the pleasure of the president. The United States Embassy in Guyana, led by Ambassador Lynch, is carrying out the administration's policy of a more secure, more prosperous and more inclusive future for the Guyanese people. To that end, she and her team meet with stakeholders throughout Guyanese society to develop robust and sustainable democratic institutions, laws, and political practices, support economic growth and development, promote an active, organized, and empowered civil society, and promote stability and security. Best regards. You're not surprised by that statement coming from the U.S. State Department, are you?
No, I'm not at all, because again, I'm going to bring my university education into focus. When I did my second degree in international relations, one of the things that we had to do was a foreign affairs seminar, a long study on the foreign service. And exactly what they're saying there is what they've always said. The U.S., like any country, looks after its own national interests. As they tell you, yes, we are concerned about what is happening in your society and what have you. But essentially, it is so that it could run in conjunction with their national interests and their concerns. And at one stage in the world, we had a bipolar world where there were two superpowers that people were vying to have spheres of influence. Now we have moved more into a multipolar world, and I'm not even sure that is the case. But the whole issue with China, the whole issue with some other states, those issues have come about because certain states want to be the dominant states, want to be the policemen. So from that point of view, I'm not at all surprised. But as my mother used to say, you can't talk one for Paris and two for night. If you are saying that it must be a rules-based society, the person who is disabled and somebody pelting their house and they're not able to reach the police or not able to be treated with respect under the Constitution of Guyana, then you, once you know about it, you have to say to the government of the day and to all stakeholders that these people must also be treated correctly. In the same way, earlier on, I mentioned Article 149B. I think that's what it is of the Constitution, where it says clearly that all pension, gratuity, that is an enforceable right. And yet we have people who decide that, that that's not the case. This is, and this is a case where we're talking about discrimination. It says it very, very clearly. 149B, every public sector worker shall enjoy an absolute and enforceable right to any pension or gratuity granted to him or her under the provision of any law or collective agreement of any kind whatsoever. Sometimes I like to remind people that, we talk a lot, but we've got to act on the same rule-based societies that we like to build. Democracies must not just be of giving up your sovereignty to the sovereign who you elect every 5 years, and that sovereign decides for you everything. No, it must be, as Professor Stitchcomb said, a majority of minority interests. It must work for everyone. And just saying it doesn't make it happen.
You know, we're looking at the time. Enrico Woolford, our guest here this evening. I promised him that he would not be on for more than 10 or 15 minutes. And, well, we have gone way over that. Enrico, before we go, why do you suppose, and this is what I have observed, and the evidence is out there, that the PPP, when they were in office for that 23 years, they were, for the most part, very uncomfortable with this guy, the first Black U.S. ambassador to Guyana, the first Black. They were also uncomfortable. Sorry, this is Ambassador Roland Bullen that was in Guyana. They were uncomfortable with him. They were also uncomfortable with the second Black American U.S. President, ambassador to Guyana, John Jones. They were very much uncomfortable with him. They wanted these guys to go ASAP. One left because of threats. The other one left, I believe, halfway through his term. And then they also had another problem with this guy who's standing there with his wife next to then President Barack Obama. Why do you suppose, Mr. Woolford, the PPP had problems with those ambassadors?
Well, I can and can never speak for the PPP. And again, it is not my position usually to give opinions, but to seek after ensuring that people understand the facts of a society, understand the truth of the society. First, we've got to make something a little clear, Mark, because we've said it, I think you have said it before on this program, and it's not quite true. The first Black U.S. ambassador was Rear Admiral Thomas, who came during the period of the PNC, as far as I recall. So Roland Bullen and Jones and the others who came after that. So Roland was not the first, Ambassador Bullen was not the first Black ambassador. He was, in effect, the first Black ambassador while the PPP was in office. That would be correct to say. Having said that, one, I think, has to understand the genesis of the People's Progressive Party from the early 1940s and the activity in 1953. The dream of the PPP in 1953, as far as I understand it, was to ensure that we had a working class society where the people of Guyana were able to work together in tandem. And I think the way Dr. Jagan and Forbes Burnham, who was a member of the PPP, the first Minister of Education in the People's Progressive Party, the way they wanted to see this society was as a working class society that would then grow and develop. There were various conflicting and mitigating circumstances that led to the divisions in the society. And as historian Bobby Moore pointed out, those divisions did not start with the political leaders. Those divisions had been there since the 1600s, the 1700s, the way slavery was brought in the society, the way indentureship came into the society, and how those people who ran the world and probably still run the world think societies ought to function. which brings me back to the pigeonholing of people and categorizing of people. And therefore, what has happened is that Guyana has suffered from its own history, where one side feels that they know best how to run the society, and the other side feels that they've been left out. And some of the talkers now happily took part in operations that in some cases allowed them to be members of parliament. I have a book right here. It's got to be right here. Right here. Where's the report of the election of 1973?
Whilst you get to that, Enrico, let me say thank you for that. Probably a slippage, or I just didn't recall at all that the first Black American ambassador to Guyana was in 1982, appointed by Ronald Reagan. Eustace Gerald Thomas, here is the guy.
Yes.
Thank you so much. So he's not and what is of interest, though, is this guy was appointed by a Republican president, Ronald Reagan, to serve as ambassador to Guyana. And years later, decades later, the other African-American ambassador to Guyana, U.S. ambassador, happens to be, he was appointed by another Republican president. And the third African-American ambassador to Guyana, U.S. ambassador, was appointed by another Republican president, the same Republican president. I just thought that I mentioned that all three African-American U.S. ambassadors to Guyana, and thanks for that reminder, in 1982 was the first African-American U.S. ambassador to Guyana, appointed by then President Ronald Reagan. Thank you so much.
Clearly you saw the dynamics of what was happening there. The Republicans felt that this was a way to placate those people down there, as to how to deal with the society. And truth be told, Rear Admiral Thomas did not necessarily get a warm welcome from the then
administration
either. So one also has to recall in the society the things that have happened. And
but whilst he was
out to you
the
1973 election resulted in names like Desmond Hoyt, let me call some names, being part of the People's National Congress list. I see a Ramson here on this list. Joseph Ganga Ramson. I see a Christopher Nascimento on this list.
And Ganga Ramson, is he the father of Charles Ramson?
Know all of these things, but it is in the air.
He sounds like though he's the father of Charles Ramson and the grandfather.
The same people turn around and try to lecture on how societies need to function. If we forget our history, we are destined to repeat it.
I got you. But the first African-American U.S. ambassador to Guyana in 1982 under the Burnham-led administration, whilst he was seen or deemed as suspicious, or maybe as an operative of whatever that is, he wasn't treated as how this guy was treated at his residence, the U.S. ambassador residence, by a then sitting minister of the then government, insulted in undiplomatic language. This is Ambassador Brent Hart and his beautiful wife there. Anyways.
As I said, I don't normally give opinions, but I was at that ceremony.
Oh, yeah.
I have been trained in international relations, and to my mind, that was a descent into jacassery. We had definitely crossed the line, and the funny thing is, the person who was speaking was saying that the ambassador crossed the line. But if this is the case, both sides crossed the line.
And she said that the ambassador crossed the line.
Into a person's
Sorry. She said that she accused the ambassador of crossing the line when all the ambassador was asking for, all he was asking for, in very respectful language, is that, in a very respectful language and tone, is that local government elections should be held. After 20-something years, they have not held local government elections. They want millions and millions of dollars from the US, but they don't want the ambassador to say, hey guys, what happened with local government elections? I don't know. Hypocrisy is way, way too much. We're looking at the time.
There was a boy here called Taku Manraj, who once said that what Guyana suffers from is an apotheosis of arrogance, an apotheosis of arrogance, where the leaders believe that they can behave as arrogant as possible because they have raised arrogance to the point of a god.
Before we go, of course, I want your closing remarks, but I want you to listen to this here, because I want your opinion, if you're going to share your opinion with us. Listen to this from the guy who sits there as the vice president of the country, and we'll be back.
You have to test people's basically tolerance, their patience, and basically whether they're mentally retarded, to tell people in this country that they won the elections. Any person who believes that in the face of all the evidence, in the face of the entire international community saying otherwise, in the face of the fact that the SOPs that Lowenfield had and that the PPP had and everyone had showed that the PPP won, but their SOPs never surfaced so far. They can't be made public because Harman is sitting on them like in a nest waiting for them to hatch little eggs, can't get them out before time or else they would spoil, like when you sit on eggs. So that's where the SOPs are. So any person, they're doing documentaries, etc., that would believe that they won the election has to be delusional.
All right, get away from that, calling basically supporters of the coalition mentally retarded and so forth. Here's a matter that is still before the court, of which they are a party to that elections petition, but yet he feels comfortable talking about that. And on top of that, calling people mentally retarded. Your take before we go, if you have an opinion, that is.
I repeat, I normally don't like to give opinions, but in this case I will. Because I think it comes back to what we were talking about earlier on the top of this program, that the tendency here is for politicians and people in power to be very insensitive, to be extremely insensitive to people's feelings, to people's belief systems in some cases. And as I was talking about with one of the prime ministers of the Caribbean, we don't say things to bring people together. We say things to continue the divide. For some reason, we believe that if we continue this divide, then we will always win and we will always be in control and we will always have the societies we have. And I dare say COVID is teaching us a lesson. No matter how big and important and arrogant and insensitive you are, as my mother used to say, is end up in the hospital.
Lots of that we are seeing. Insensitive statements. People are very uncomfortable with another insensitive statement, this time coming from Ms. Priya Manik Chan, who says that they should assume that all the parents are illiterate. All the parents of the students are illiterate. I don't know where these people come out with these sort of things from. But Mr. Woolford, your closing remarks, sir.
I heard the clip that people are has been attributed to Miss Manik Chan. I don't think she meant what came out, but I don't want to try to explain for her. But I'm going to give you an example of what happened to me today. I was at Ogle Airport. Young man pulls up in a taxi. He's driving a taxi, and he has been there for a little while. He was asking me if I'm coming out of my parking spot so he can get in. And then he pulls alongside me when the car makes space for him. Then I walked away. He was there for a little while, walked away. And then he called me back when I went back to my vehicle. And he said, "Big up." And he showed me a piece of paper. "Big up, tell me what's on this paper, because I'm looking for a man who's supposed to come on a flight here." So I took the paper. He said, "Read it to me." This is a young man, you know. I read what was on the paper to him. There was a photograph on the paper. And I said, "You know, sir, the way you can know if somebody's coming, you can write the name at the back." And I noticed the hesitancy. Then I said, "Do you have a pen?" I took the pen. I wrote the name of the passenger. I said, "What you do now?" And I have a feeling it's that passenger across there because it looked like the picture, although the guy was wearing a mask. And he got up, went out, and that was the passenger. Mark, you realize what that is telling us? You realize what that is telling us? In our society where we talk about literacy and what have you, even if he were a Spanish-speaking person, he was not conversant in written English to the point that he could identify the passenger for whom he was sent. And we've got to be concerned about literacy. We've got to be concerned about education. But it doesn't mean that we've got to be condescending and we have got to be insensitive to people. We saw 5 years of insensitivity in the United States and what that brought us. So we've got to be sensitive. We've got to reach out to people rather than push them apart. And unfortunately, we have not been doing that successfully for several years. But you know, I hope one day, I can travel around this country and be comfortable in any part of the society because I've done my DNA and I know what I'm made up of. And I'm happy to say that I too belong here based on how I'm made up in this society and from what I've come.
Well said. And again, I wish to say that I have done my DNA through Ancestry.com or whatever. And on top of the list happens to be the Woolford. Enrico Woolford, $150 million. Who wouldn't want to be related to you, Enrico? Lots of people are saying that you're their first cousin, second cousin, and all sorts of things. But on a more serious note, thank you so much for gracing us with over 1 hour of your time right here. Give my regards to your beautiful wife, Pat. And thank you. Continue to be safe with your family in this pandemic period. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Mark. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Enrico. All right, Enrico Woolford there for you guys. And we're looking at the time, 17 minutes after 10 o'clock, 17 minutes after 10 o'clock. A lot of you guys want more of Enrico. We will invite him back very soon. Hopefully by then he should get his $150 million. I'm told, as Enrico said earlier, that Gordon Mosley is also into that money. My cousin, Gordon Mosley from Linden, my aunt's son, that is. Somehow we got to find somewhere where we're related to these guys. My cousin Enrico Woolford and my cousin Gordon Mosley, $150 million. The court has awarded them in default. But you know how these people, they're not going to want to pay up their money. But this time around, they got to pay up to my two cousins, Enrico and Gordon Mosley. Let us go quickly. To what I just asked Mr. Woolford about Priya Manik Chan's statement about people assuming that the kids' parents are illiterate. I don't know how that could be a politically, I don't see that as a politically correct statement at all. It is something only someone who is probably suffering from some form of mental retardation would say such a thing, insensitive thing. Why don't you say that, let us assume that every student in the classroom would need some form of help because maybe their parents are probably, have other stuff to do. They might be distracted or so forth. I don't know. These people are weird. Mentally retardation, typical example of it. Hear what she had to say.
And it restated for us our purpose here, that we must treat every child as though they have an illiterate parent. And restated for us our purpose here, that we must treat every child as though they have an illiterate parent.
All right, we must treat every person sitting there on the PPP side, on the install regime side, as though they're suffering from some form of mental retardation. We must treat them as such. Would that be a nice statement to make? I don't know. Hey, guys, thank you all so much for tuning in. Oh, one other thing before we go. I might as well just go have a glass of wine. Seriously. I was just about to give my opinion about the AFC. I was just about to do that. And you know what they say in Guyana, right? That little voice say, no. But the AFC, depon stupidness. The depon stupidness. The AFC, depon stupidness. I've got to go, man. I love you guys, every single one of you, including those from Freedom House suffering from mental retardation. I love everybody I love. Yeah, Mark Benschop loves everybody. Yes, I do. I've got to go. Until, when is it? Monday? Same place, same time. God bless you all. Mwah.
It's hard to be at peace with the ones who are so discard. It's hard. Them have a knife in your back and them smile it so broad. Help me to deal with the ones them who said them love me when them really don't. Help me to deal with the fans them kill me flesh when the crowd are shout. Jesus, help me on the battlefield. Jesus, help me on the battlefield. Help me on the battlefield. Cause the booby traps with them set is real. I never want to take your glory, Lord. Send your angels to encamp around about me and stand guard. To envy is so easy and to love it is so hard. Let me work for your glory and not for the award. Don't make me ever get caught up in the scream and the applause. And go talk about the blessing and not talk about the Lord. All these things are vanity. I need your reward. Let me be real. Don't put on no facade. Help me to deal with the ones them who said them love me when them really don't. Help me to deal with the fans them kill me flesh when the crowd are shout. Jesus, help me on the battlefield. Jesus, help me on the battlefield. Help me on the battlefield. God, the booby traps with them set is real. Sticks and stones can break my bones and words can harm me. They can harm me. When the evil come against me, you'll protect me. You'll protect me. Father, I need the strength of your son. Cause you know my work is not done. Lord, I need that endurance just to finish this race that I run. Help me to deal with the ones them who said them love me when them really don't. And help me to deal with the fans them kill me flesh when the crowd are shout. Jesus, help me on the battlefield. Jesus, help me on the battlefield. Help me on the battlefield. God, the booby traps with them set is real. You tell me to stand firm, cause every little plan you have a confirm. I know them evil plan turn. In a darkness, me a the long term. So help me to deal with the ones that who said them love me when them really don't. Jesus, help me to deal with the fans them kill me flesh when the crowd are shout. Help me on the battlefield. Jesus, help me on the battlefield. Help me on the battlefield. God, the booby traps with them set is real. Help me to deal with the ones them who said them love me when them really don't. Help me to deal with the fans them kill me flesh when the crowd are shout. Jesus, help me on the battlefield. Jesus, help me on the battlefield. Help me on the battlefield. God, the booby traps with them set is real. Help me to deal with the ones them who said them love me when them really don't. Help me to deal with the fans them kill me flesh when the crowd are shout. Jesus, help me on the battlefield. Jesus, help me on the battlefield.